Okay, welcome to another exciting edition on my YouTube channel. I'm joking. Today we're going to be looking at lenses, specifically Nikon D lenses on a D780 camera. I've been asked, I did a bit of a review several weeks ago, and several people have said to me, how do Nikon D lenses focus on the D780? Are they as good as the G lenses? I've already explained in previous videos why I use D lenses, and that for me is because I like the look that they give me much better. The look works even better on my D700, but the D780 is the camera that I use for sort of paid events, weddings and family shoots and big bro and that kind of thing. But for me, for arty sort of prints that I produce from my other print sales website, I normally use the D700. Okay, so today we're going to put each of my lenses on the D780. We're going to focus on Steve, my model at the end here. You will see how, I'll focus on the back of the camera, you'll see how quickly it focuses, how accurately it focuses. We'll look at the detail in Lightroom. We'll pop into Lightroom and look at each of the lenses, a photo from each of the lenses afterwards, so you can see the detail, and give you a chance to assess whether or not D lenses are for you, or whether you're going to go for a G lens. The lenses we're going to be looking at are my, what's that, 18? Excuse me. Yes, 18. 18 to 35. 3.5 to 4.5. That's a lens I never meant to keep that. I dropped my 17 to 35 2.8 to f4 lens, and it had a kind of rattled. So several years ago I quickly bought this because I had a wedding that weekend, and I love it. It's fine. It's perfectly okay. So going out from there, we've got the 35 F2D Lens. I've got the 85 f1.4 D lens, and of course the 135 f2D lens defocus lens. I've also got, for comparison, the 50mm f1.8 G lens. It doesn't look like a G lens, it is a G lens. It's a retro edition that I particularly like because it goes with all the other lenses. It looks a bit more like a D lens, so they all look a bit the same. Bit of vanity there. But we'll start out with the zoom lens, then we go on to 35, the 50, the 85 and the 135. Quickly go through. I'm not going to spend too long doing this, I won't drag it out. I'll put each lens on, we'll focus, we'll see how quickly it focuses and how accurately it focuses. First of all, looking at the back of the screen, but then, as I say, we'll look at each of photos from each of the lenses in Lightroom. So, without further ado, okay, so we're starting out with the 18 to 35 lens. You can see Steve over in the top left-hand corner, and obviously on the back of the screen as well. Let me just turn off live view. So I've got auto area, so the whole of the screen is the focus area. I've got face detect and IAF turned on, so when I go into when I go into Lightroom, I don't even get a chance. It just instantly picks up the face, and it let me just show you it. It's pretty damn good at tracking, even with this 35 lens. And I'm quite some distance away, and if I zoom out, we still track the face okay. And as we zoom in, now we're never going to get to eye detect from this distance, and it's simply not necessary. Okay, so we'll just hit focus and take that shot. Sorry, I've got silent shutter turned on. Why have I got that on? Let's turn that off. Right, let's do that again. Okay, quick review of the photo. Let's zoom in. So it's 100% zoom in. again, in Lightroom, we'll look even closer. But the thing I'm going to be looking for is the texture on this Taylor's dummy here. We'll see it on the other lenses when we get a bit closer, and we'll see it in Lightroom when we get there. So that's the 18 to 35. I've now popped the 35 F2D lens on. And again, instantly pick up his face. And again, tracking is, well, it doesn't get much better. My Sony A7 III, when I had that, didn't do any better than that. What I'm now going to do is, so I've got a single point, if you can just see it, the little red square in the center. I'll focus on the background, and we're on single shot focus, so we should get beep. And back to Steve. It is, I press the button and it beeps. It's instant. If I now put face detect back on by going to whole area, as you can see, it finds his face instantly and tracks him all over the place. And we'll take a shot. Right, we'll look at that shortly in Lightroom. Okay, so back into live view with a 50mm 1.8G lens. Turn the camera on, it'll work much better. So we have face detect instantly. I just need to maybe move that up a bit now. Hit focus, and as you can see, and we now get eye autofocus. Let's take a shot like that. And if I zoom in even more than 100%, you can start to see we've got some very sharp, clear, woven cloth pattern. That's great. As for focusing speed, so focus on Steve. Focus on the background. Steve, background. So that's instant. And we'll look at the images in a moment in Lightroom. And we now have the 85 1.4D lens. And as you can see, with face detect on, it's picking his eye up instantly, and you can switch from one eye to the other with the D-pad. Very simple. So let's focus and take a shot. Now remember, we are on 1.4 and I'm focusing on his eye, not on the material. So it may be that the material is actually out of focus. Yes, it does look like it is. So let's go to the speed test. We'll go to small area. So we've got little red square, and we'll do a speed test. So we'll focus on the background. Now that did take and I don't know if you heard it. You did hear the lens move. It's got a lot of glass to move in the 85 lens, and it's a bit slower than the a little bit of hunting, but that was on just a plain green background. Okay, I think you get the idea. It's let's go to wide area, so we get face detect. And you can see it was pretty instant, and okay, it probably takes, what are we talking, a quarter of a second, but we'll see how accurate that is as regards focusing is on his eye. We'll now go back to small area, and I'm going to focus on the cloth there, and we'll take a shot of that. And that would be interesting to see that in Lightroom. It looks very sharp from here. Okay, let's move on to the last lens. So the 135 F2D lens. Okay, as we've got the individual focus point, we'll do the speed test. And as the lens gets longer, it does get slower, which is kind of what you'd expect. And I'm asking it to move from about 6 or 8 feet away from me to 20 feet away. No, more than that probably, 30, 35 feet away. So it has got to move focus a lot. If you're focusing just from something, there's not much to focus on there. Something quite close to each other, then focus is much better, as you would expect. Right, so we'll focus on the cloth. We'll get a shot of that, and then we'll go to eye, autofocus, and get a shot like that. And just to show you again, tracking on this lens is perfectly, again, as good as a Sony lens with a 135, a Sony camera with a 135 lens on. So that's my rundown. Let's go and have a look in Lightroom at those photos and see just how sharp and just make sure that focus is accurate. Welcome to Lightroom. We have the photos here and we'll go through them again without spending too much time on analysing every last nook and cranny. We're starting out with the 18 to 35 zoom lens, my temporary replacement from several years ago, which I've still got. It's a bit dark, isn't it? I'm not sure why this has come out quite so dark. You can see we've got some extremely bad, whoops, sorry, I went over a preset, some quite bad vignetting around this side certainly, and for some reason, I'm not sure why, we're only at 400 ISO, anyway, let's not worry about that. That's not the object of the exercise. Let's get that so it's around about the right exposure. I mean, okay, as a photo, just looking here, it doesn't look bad at all. The colours are reasonably good. And if we focus on Steve, we're at 100% zoom. That's not bad at all, is it? But when we look at the pattern, actually, when we look at the pattern, I wasn't expecting that. That is actually really pretty damn good. Yeah, every mark is perfectly detailed in the pattern there. So yeah, overall that's I'm surprised actually. That's maybe I should use this lens a bit more. I tend to use this lens really just at weddings for getting kind of architectural shots of a whole room, because I can zoom out to 18 millimeters. And get some sort of kind of distorted shots also of maybe things like the wedding car and that kind of thing as well. So I don't use it very much, but yeah, well, that's pleasantly surprising. So let's compare that, and you saw the focus speed is again pretty damn good. It's almost instantaneous, certainly quick enough to be a practical lens to use. Right, let's have a look at, what's this? Let's actually have a look at the 35. For some reason that's out of sequence. This is the 35 F2D lens. So we've got a slightly larger aperture. In fact, quite a lot larger aperture. The ISO is now dropped down to 100. And we won't even bother looking at Steve because we can't really tell any
if there's any detail there at all. But if we look at the detail in the model here, yeah, that in fact doesn't look very different to the zoom lens we've just looked at. The overall look at the photo is somewhat better, not so much vignetting. The exposure is more like correct, it's probably slightly off. We could probably lift that by about, where are we there, quarter of a stop. So I can live with the photo being a quarter of a stop off. Right, now the 50mm G lens. So this is something to compare to. You saw the speed of the 50mm G is, again, pretty much instantaneous, but then it probably was very similar to the 35 as well. I mean, these are quite small lenses, they're not moving big lumps of glass around, so you would expect the focus speed to be good. The sharpness, my Lightroom is being very slow to render. I'm actually uploading some photos, so it's slowing it down a bit. Right, so obviously 50mm, we're closer in. That is absolutely, that's as good as any camera I've ever used in my life. Every bit as good as the best lenses I ever had on the Sony, which was the 50mm Sigma 1.4 art lens. This is just as good. Remember, it's wide open. I was going to say it could possibly be even sharper at 5.6, but actually I don't see how it could be any sharper. And you can see the depth of field here. We are going out of focus. Really the only area that's actually in focus is this area here. We're out of focus for the rest of it. So even though it's only 1.8, we've still got a pretty decent shallow depth of field. And the actual photo itself, well, we've got, I was going to say we've got no vignetting. I don't think that's vignetting. I think that is just a bit of a dark corner. There's certainly no evidence of vignetting here. Exposure wise, absolutely spot on. So that's a that's probably my cheapest lens, and that is a really good lens. It's a lens that at a wedding I would use. 60-70% of the shots will be taken with that lens. Let's move on to the 85. So 85 1.4, you would expect a really shallow depth of field. You saw that the focus speed wasn't quite as fast as the 50 or the 35. We are now moving some fairly big lumps of glass around, and it is a little bit slower. Whether the 85 G Master G lens 1.4 G lens would be much faster, I'm not sure. It would possibly be a tad faster, but how fast do you need a lens to be? If you're shooting action, you're probably not going to be using an 85 1.4 lens to shoot kind of sports or anything like that. So super fast focus isn't what it's all about. What this lens is all about is really shallow depth of field and good sharpness. Sorry. Actually, I'm going to go to that one because I think the second one, this one here, I was actually focusing rather than on his eye. I was actually focusing on the material here. Right, so we're finally in focus, and as you would expect, we've got an incredibly shallow depth of field. We're completely out of focus, even just that's probably only an inch in terms of distance of focal plane away from here. And well, the excuse me, the detail is just absolutely brilliant. Again, as you come over to this side, we've shifted the distance slightly. We might just go back into focus as we sort of go round the model slightly, and we get back into focus there. So again, I mean, you can see every little hair and things sticking up there. So yeah, absolutely superb lens. And finally, the 135, where where focusing was, as you saw, getting really a bit slow. Again, you're not going to use a 135 f2 lens for sports. It's a portrait lens. It focuses in probably, even when it's slow, what's that taking? A quarter, a third of a second. For what I use this for, that is absolutely fast enough. There is no problems ever with the focusing speed. And the focusing accuracy, well, and the sharpness, again, remember this is f2, this is wide open, this is, as, if you like, this is as bad as it gets. And again, I'm not sure I've hit the best focus point here, but you can, would you ever want any more detail than that? I don't think so. And in fact, I tend to use the 135 f2D for portrait shots on my D700 because I actually get less detail, which gives me less work, less editing. I mean, if this was a real person, he is a real person, and I have really shot him. If this was real life, and this was a woman, I would have a heck of a lot of work to do to turn this into a good portrait shot. Simply because there's too much detail. On the D700, it's less detail. It's an easier life for me, and it's just, I don't know. Certainly for women, it's just more flattering. You can see the out of focus background. I mean, it's just crazy. Maybe back on this one. Oops, sorry. Oh, stop it. You can see that it's taken the background. It just turns it into some splodges of colour. It's absolutely gorgeous. The 85, in terms of bokeh, is almost as good. Obviously, you're zoomed out somewhat, so. But it's still pretty pleasing. There's nothing really distracting in the background there, and it's not until you get down to the 50 that you actually start to be able to make out the background. But that's kind of what the 50 is for. The 50 is, in my view, mainly as a wedding photographer, to set the subject in the scene. You wouldn't necessarily want the background in this sort of shot completely blown out, because you do want to, as I say, have some context to the photo. So I hope you found that useful. From my point of view, I've chosen the D lenses I've got because, in my experience, and having used Sony A7 III with really expensive lenses, these are more artistic. They are fast enough. They are perfectly accurately focus wise. I'll just mention, almost finished, this was obviously live view. So live view, there is no AF fine tune required. If you shoot through the viewfinder, you do need to adjust each lens. Some people say you can just bolt them on there and use them straight out. In fact, I don't think I've ever found a Nikon or anyone else's lens that you can shoot through the viewfinder without doing some sort of AF fine tune. It may be only sort of plus or minus 2 or 3. You can adjust them up to plus or minus 20, I think it is. And I've had some that have been, plus or minus 10 or 12. I don't know what the actual numbers mean, but it's quite a lot out of focus. And you must do that first for viewfinder accuracy. Okay, hope you found that useful, and thanks for watching.